Mike Horn.
Hi there. Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you don't know, my name is Jordan Krasinski, and I have the honor of serving as the Director of Membership with Good Business Colorado. Today, Good Business Colorado, rather, is a statewide nonpartisan business association of over 250 values-driven business owners who are all committed to building a prosperous, equitable, and sustainable Colorado. So today we are so happy to welcome Jeff Kinsey of the Logos Group. Combining 25 years of operational relationship management and sales leadership experience with 20 years of backcountry wilderness adventure, Jeff brings a unique approach to guiding a wide variety of firms and their executives through particularly challenging organizational hurdles. He has found a strong correlation in both solo and guided backpacking with successful team management in the workplace, which leaves him better equipped to ask the right questions to help teams determine the best course of action. Jeff has a consistently curious approach and seeks to understand the various perspectives and alternatives, giving him a deeper and broader base from which to guide teams and their leaders toward new possibilities. Jeff starts with the strongest foundation from which to determine the ideal solution and leaves his clients better equipped to make appropriate strategic and tactical adjustments along the way. Jeff has spent 20 years building operations, service, and sales teams for JP Morgan, Citi, State Street, the Bank of New York, Bankers Trust Company, and Huntington Bank. He holds an MBA in strategic leadership from the Dominican University of California, as well as an undergraduate degree in business administration with an emphasis in finance and entrepreneurship from the University of Southern California. Jeff lives in with his family high in the Rockies, west of Boulder, where he spends a lot of his time in the Colorado backcountry, as much time in the Colorado backcountry as possible. So just a little bit about today's event. It is going to be an interactive event, so we welcome your questions. We'll be taking questions by voice through Zoom and also in the chat box. So after the presentation, if you've got questions, please feel free to ask those. After today's session, you'll also receive an email with a feedback form. So please take a moment to share your thoughts with us. Let us know what you thought of today's event and any opinions on what you think other programming could look like for Good Business Colorado. And for now, I'll go ahead and send it on over to Jeff.
Thanks so much, Jordan. Really appreciate the introduction. It kind of made me think I might want to rewrite that and make it a little bit smaller, but it was interesting listening to it. So thank you for that, and thank you and Deborah and Karen so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about this kind of stuff in this business environment. It was right after the lockdown, I think, when you guys started a calling plan, reaching out to all the members, and I got a call from Deborah, asking what GBC could do for me. And I said, well, I'm actually pretty good. I mean, I get to live up in the mountains in this glass house where I don't feel like I'm claustrophobic at all. I'm stuck here with my family, which, my kids are older, so having them back in the house with us 24/7 was just a phenomenal experience. So I was in a really good place. So I turned that back around and said, well, what, Deborah, can I do maybe to help the membership? People are so stressed out right now and don't know what's going on and what's going to happen. Is there anything that I can do maybe with a webinar or something like that to kind of share this understanding I have about our relationship with our thoughts? And here we are. So I really appreciate, the opportunity. I'm grateful for all the people that have come online and hope that that you guys can all get some value out of what I'm going to be presenting here. I guess I'll start with a little bit of background. Not that you haven't heard enough background about me already, but from a more personal level, I really grew up, thinking that I was following the American dream. My dad had told me, if you work hard, you'll make money. That was the American dream to me. So I went out and I did that. I worked really hard all through school. Got my degree, got out, got a job, worked in banking, and had a good career working through sales, service, management, running teams, building teams, doing all that kind of stuff. And about 20 years in, I realized I was absolutely miserable. I had done everything I was told I was supposed to do to be happy, and I was not happy. And that miserableness that I had experienced or was experiencing was really affecting every part of my life. My kids weren't happy with me. I was just such an asshole all the time. My wife had it. She wanted to move out. She's like, I can't live like this anymore. And I was, quite frankly, I was suicidal. I just didn't. I was in so much pain in the way that I was, and that I didn't think I could do anything about it. That I just didn't want to be around anymore. It just didn't make sense to me to live that way anymore. And like I said, I didn't know what to do about it. So interestingly enough, around that same time, when I was struggling with all these things, a really good friend of mine came to me and said, I'm going to be starting this coaching practice and I could use some guinea pigs to practice on. So what do you think? And I thought, sure, I'll do a favor for my buddy and just kind of sit in and see, if I can help him out. And he started talking to me about the way that I made meaning out of my experiences and how I considered my thoughts, my relationship to my thoughts and where they came from. And I had never heard anybody talk like that before. Again, it was like, my thoughts are in my head. That's who I am. This is what's going on. But I was so miserable that I was up for anything that might be different, anything that might be able to help. And so I paid attention to what he was saying, and it made a tremendous difference. He really saved my life. And I thank him almost every time I see him, just like, hey man, thank you. You saved my life. And my wife sent him notes thanking him and all that kind of stuff. So through that experience, it was really fascinating because, 20 years working in banking, what have you, when you think about it, banks are just huge groups of people. When I was at Citigroup, we had about 350,000 employees. They fired 100,000 people in a day, and you couldn't tell the difference. I was at JP Morgan. They had about 300,000 people when I was there too. It's just people. You're not really doing anything except talking to, managing, persuading, and working with people. So I got a really good understanding of how people work effectively together. And then through the coaching that I had been experiencing, I got a really good understanding about how people work intrinsically. And that combination of things has given me this great platform to be a consultant and a coach, where I work with small businesses and, dear to my heart, nonprofits, trying to bring some advanced, maybe business acumen into their environments and do it in a really human way. Help them really be better humans through coaching, because I believe that better humans make better leaders. And the human that walks out the door in the morning is the same human that walks into the office. So, it's important that we understand that putting a mask on here or there might help us get through this or that, but we're still the same people. So that's the way that I work with my coaching. And I really love what I do now. And I get up every day and I can't wait to get rolling. And I'm happier than shit, you could say. So I'm just really enjoying it. So let's get into the deck, and I'll talk to you guys a bit about this whole concept of mental fitness. And I think, when we're getting into topics like psychology and quantum physics and neurobiology and these kinds of things, we don't always share the same understanding of what any of that kind of stuff might be. So metaphors come in really handy. So what I've done here is taking some concepts that for the most part we all have an understanding of. Whether we work out or not, we get the physical fitness concepts around speed, agility, balance, and mobility. And I can take those concepts, talk about what they mean in that context, and then sort of explain how those transfer into more of a mental capacity, a mental fitness, if you will, and how thinking about these things in that sort of way can help you on a day-to-day basis just be more content with the meaning that you make out of these experiences that you have, that you understand how thought gets formed and how you have a relationship with that, and how you can use that understanding to your advantage through life. So let's get started. I'm looking, okay. Speed, there we go. So speed, this isn't trying to reach a new high speed. This is about really having the right speed, the appropriate speed for the situation that you're in. And I like to look at it from a sporting or fitness perspective is, riding your bike, and assuming that your bike has a bunch of gears on it. You understand how that bike operates. You understand that when you shift gears around, that changes the speed at which you're able to travel. So when you come on a mountain, you might downshift, so that you can ride up to the top. And when you get to the top, you shift back the other way so that you gain speed going down. So you have an understanding that by changing the speed or the gearing of the bicycle, that you end up with the appropriate speed for the situation. So if you look at this from a mental perspective and how the mind works, with the advent of this fMRI machine, they're able to actually monitor people as they're thinking. And they found that we have between 30 and 70,000 individual thoughts every day. And we don't always know that. Most of them we don't even pay attention to. And a lot of them are just repetitive. Why'd you do that? That's so dumb. Haven't you learned what's going on? That kind of stuff. And many of those thoughts generate feelings, and we don't even necessarily see the thought, but then we have a feeling about it. We're like, huh, that's weird. My stomach's tight. I feel sort of nervous. My skin's a little tingly. I've got hot spots by my, in my chest. Those are a reaction to the thought that you have that you might not even have noticed, but those feelings are a barometer for you so that you can get an understanding of what's going on in your mind. So it really is a matter of using the experience that you're having, understanding that, the feelings you're having are coming from these thoughts, and to take that as an indicator, if you will, to pay a little bit more attention to that and see, what is it about that might be affecting you that way. When I look at this in a business context, I think about performance reviews, and whether you're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, you have a team or not, my guess is that you've been through a performance review on one side of the table or another in your career, and that can be a really stressful, trying experience. You get caught up in your head, things move fast, you're on the defense. You're not necessarily able to control the speed of your thinking as you're responding to questions or asking somebody or telling somebody what their performance has been. So being able to have this ability to really control the speed of your thinking in the moment can be really helpful as you sort of sit back and participate from a place of consciousness, as opposed to being really caught up in your head. An example that I have of myself along these lines, I mentioned that my wife wasn't very happy with me at one point. She ended up taking a 6-month marriage sabbatical and lived up in Alaska for 6 months. And while she was up there, she realized that she was missing a few pictures of our kids. We have 2 kids that are 22 and 25 right now. So I went out to the garage where we keep all of our most precious possessions all boxed up, waiting for the next fire to come through so that we can evacuate quickly. And because we realized that after we moved in here about 12 years ago, we have all our most precious possessions out in the garage. She wanted some pictures. I went out to this box that has them. I open it up, and of course, there's pictures of our kids from when they were children that I hadn't seen in 12 years. And initially, I just started bawling. I just broke down right there, and my instinct was to close up the box and put it away. But I said, wait a minute, I have some more skills now. There's this thing about being able to sort of be in the moment, to realize what's going on with me, to kind of welcome these feelings in that I'm having. So I opened the box, and I had tears streaming down my face, but I was in such a nice, peaceful place of contentment as I looked through these pictures, and it's making me emotional remembering it, the feeling of it. Just really enjoying this opportunity to reflect on the time of when my children were younger. And I had just such an enjoyable experience for probably 20 minutes looking through these. And then I could feel that my heart just really started to hurt. And I said, okay, I guess that's it. And I'm done. And I closed the box and I put it away. And that was that. And I was just so excited at the opportunity to see how this really works, that I could really slow my mind down by not getting caught up in the thoughts of just how much I miss my kids when they were little, and just really be able to enjoy the experience of looking through those pictures that I wouldn't have
Hey, Jeff, are you still with us? Sorry about this, folks. It looks like we might be having just a technical glitch on Jeff's end. 1 second. That's right, Mike. All right, it looks like he may have logged off to jump back in here in just a second. So thanks everyone for your patience. Really appreciate it. Justin, sure. Let's unmute you. Justin, you're unmuted.
Hey guys, can you hear me okay? So Jeff is actually a dear friend of mine and fellow coach. So I can run interference till he gets back online here. And I actually know this story really well. And you know, Jeff is really tapped into an amazing understanding of how thinking is kind of shaping our reality moment to moment in a very cool way, and the practicality of that when it comes to sort of the day to day in business. So he ends up helping a lot of people through that understanding. So now back to you, Jeff.
Thanks for being around, Justin. Oh,
No problem.
cool. Sorry about that, guys. My internet went out for a minute. Hopefully, Justin shared some beauty as he normally does. So I'm back, Jordan. Got my screen up?
Yep.
Awesome. So agility, right? To me, agility is really about being able to react in the moment. And I think, when you think about the tire drill, and I don't know, I know I froze, so I don't know how far I got into the whole tire drill thing, but if you think about football players, the things that you've seen maybe running through these tires, it's all about being able to react quickly in the moment. Trying to step right into the middle of the tire is one thing, but when you catch a toe on one and you start to fall down, how agile are you really? Can you make those adjustments in the moment to actually be successful and get through the exercise, if you will. So when you think about that from a mind perspective, having an agile mind, it's being able to really understand how to engage your intellect or how to sit back in consciousness, and that's this point of agility where the intellect is this, and the prefrontal cortex, intellect, ego, it's all kind of the same thing. It is this fantastic computational and analytic machine and tool that we have access to, but it's not all of who we are. We have the ability to jump into our prefrontal cortex, use that as we need to figure things out, maybe work through some computation or some project we have at work. And then we have the ability to step out of that, take a breath, maybe step back a little bit. And sorry, I'm just looking at Jordan's note, thanks. Step back a bit and really be there to take things in. And the agility comes in being able to move back and forth between those things. I think about, in a business sense, emails and texts, how dangerous those things can be for us when we're caught up in our heads and we receive something that kind of sets us off a little bit and we respond to that in the moment. It's not necessarily our best foot forward, and we tend to regret those things on occasion. So being able to be agile in the moment, to recognize when your head is speeding up. I know I lean forward, and when I feel myself lean forward, that's a good indicator to me that I'm getting ahead of myself. My mind is speeding up a bit, and I'm maybe not at my best in the moment. So then I can sit back and take a breath and be able to operate like that. So if you think of like a snow globe, you shake a snow globe and it gets all cloudy inside. That's your brain on thought, if you will. When you get wrapped up in yourself, you can't think clearly, just like you can't see through the snow globe. But when you set it down on the table and you let it settle, everything clears up and you end up in this real nice, calm place where, you know, all the beauty of life comes to you. I know in my coaching these days, I found this very cool perspective where I can, you know, I'm so well connected with the people that I'm talking to that I want to contribute all the time. I have these thoughts come into my head that that would be just perfect for the moment, but the other person's not finished talking yet. What I've learned is I can just sort of sit back and kind of let that go by, that I don't have to engage right then and there. And then sure enough, it always happens that, you know, at the right time, when they're finished talking, I've been really engaged and connected with them, listening deeply, the perfect thing comes to me to say to them. And it's been a really cool experience to see these thoughts go by and to know that I have the option on whether to engage with them or not. And that's really about being agile in your mind. So then our next concept, I can't get, there we go, balance. So balance is something that I think everybody understands. You know, we live in this world of balance. If we didn't have our balance, it would be quite a challenge moving around. My favorite sort of fitness balance example is yoga. It's an extraordinary opportunity to gain a level of balance that you just have never, you don't normally experience just walking out to your car, right? So, yeah, I mean, we understand how, you know, when we start to lose our balance, you know, we gravitate back to this mean, if you will, where we regain it again. It's just a natural thing that our body does. And it works with the mind in the same way. You know, we have this innate well-being that's within us, that when we back away from our prefrontal cortex, when we get out of our intellect, we fall into this place of balance where we're really in the moment. You know, we talk about how, you know, between the last thought and the next thought is this thing that we call now. And with practice, we can expand that space. And a lot of it has to do with balance, you know, being able to understand that if you let a thought go by, you will bounce back into this point of balance. Excuse me. So, you know, I think balance, obviously, you know, in the work environment, you know, we talk a lot about work-life balance and being able to find some place where, you know, we're getting the work done that we need and we're able to spend the time with our family or go for bike rides or whatever it is that we like to do for our own personal time. So we're always trying to find that balance there, where we're content and can get our job done and really get enjoyment out of all of that. I think, you know, for me, I had this experience just a couple weeks ago. The snow finally melted out enough up here in the mountains to where I could get on my bike again. And those initial first couple rides of the season are always kind of interesting because my physical balance just hasn't really developed enough yet. You know, I'm not back in sharp to where I was before. But I had this interesting experience the other day that as I was starting to lose my balance on my bike because I hit a berm in a turn that I wasn't paying attention to, I didn't panic at all. I was in this really nicely balanced place in my mind where I didn't react to the situation that was happening. And I just sort of watched my hands move the handlebars back into the middle of the trail, and I continued on. It was just this fantastic thing about just having a nice mental balance that I could revert back to, that just took care of what I needed to do in front of me. So the last concept here is about mobility. And I think it's really the culmination of all of these things, because with, you know, the ability to kind of control the speed at which you operate within a situation, you know, the agility that you have to react in the moment, the reversion to the mean of balance, that makes you really able to do just about anything. It makes you very mobile, and mobility is a big part of it. So, you know, from a physical fitness perspective, you've got, you know, to me, it's like the Spartan games or the mud games where, you know, you don't know what's in front of you. You just start running and you have to react. You have to stay balanced. You have to use the right speed so you can make it through the whole event. And it's really a good example, I think, of how, you know, mobility comes into play from a physical perspective. Now, the mental concept around mobility is really about capacity, right? You know, I think back to before, you know, that period of time of my career, and it was always about, you know, success was about capacity and effort. You know, if I wasn't successful enough, that meant I either needed to learn something to increase my capacity, or I needed to work harder and increase my effort. And, you know, my coaching practice is made up of people that have maxed out capacity and maxed out effort and are still not happy. So what's wrong with that equation? You know, the equation really to me is that, you know, we have this unlimited capacity. When we get out of our head and we fall back into this place of clarity in the moment, we're able to receive this wisdom that's out there. I think we've all had the experience where we've been working on a problem for a while. We just can't get the answer to it. And then we're in the shower and there it is. We're driving ourselves to work. We're not paying attention to what we're doing. And all of a sudden there it is. That's, you know, the perfect thing for me to do this weekend that I just didn't know what I was going to do. It's because we're not caught up in our thoughts. You know, we're not caught up in our thinking and in our prefrontal cortex. We're just there and we're available to whatever comes to us. So we really have this infinite capacity. What's getting in the way is noise. You know, it's the thoughts that are just flowing through our head that are keeping us distracted maybe. So if we can minimize that noise, it gives us the opportunity to really experience this this unlimited capacity that's available to us. And in that is where our true mobility lies. So, you know, from a business perspective and a life perspective, you know, having mobility is all around just going out into life, right? We've got our life, we've got meetings, we've got calls, emails, family, all these different things. You know, how can we address all of that and be content and joyful, you know, as we do it, you know, where the stress doesn't get to us, you know, all the stuff that's going on right now. You know, how can we find a place where we're not engaged with our thoughts to the extent that they cause us these emotions that we just don't like, and potentially just these fears that are paralyzing. So, you know, when I was a banker, you know, it was all about achievement. That was it. You know, we worked hard, we made calls, we had, you know, our pipelines, and and our accountability was based on a calendar and a dollar amount. And then I get into coaching, and it's all about relationships and connection. And that's what I learned is what I really enjoy and appreciate out of life is a human connection, where I can step back and just enjoy the feeling. And what I found through that is when I don't worry about anything that's going on, and I just am out enjoying the experience of life, I'm talking to people, my calendar is filling up with things to do, and I'm getting them done as I'm going through it. And I'm not really putting much effort into it because I'm not making a lot of meaning out of the thoughts that are in my head. I'm just going out and doing it, to be honest. You know, I had a really interesting experience this morning as I was thinking about this webinar. You know, I went through, you know, the normal sort of nervousness about, oh, this is coming, but it was a very different experience this morning. I realized there's this really fine line between nervousness and excitement. And as I sort of took those feelings of nervousness in and welcome them in, you know, there's this a famous poem by Rumi called The Tavern, where, you know, he talks about, you know, you own this tavern, you know, you've kind of got to welcome in anybody that comes to the door. And there might be some people there that you don't really like all that much, or you don't know all that well, or what have you. But there's something that you can learn from them. So you welcome them in and you let them be, and you see how it works out. You see what you can learn from them. You know, it's the same thing with thoughts and feelings. It's not about pushing thoughts out of the way, avoiding feelings or suppressing feelings or anything like that. It's about welcoming that feeling in. I welcome in that feeling of nervousness and see what it does for me. And as I sort of reflect on it, I realize that I really enjoy this kind of stuff. And then it makes me excited to be here and talking to you. So I was just excited all morning to get on this webinar and talk to you guys. And it has a lot to do with just being mobile, you know. having the ability to bring the feelings in, see what they do for me, decide whether or not I want to pursue that thought and feeling. Maybe I'll let it go. Maybe I'll, sort of ponder it a minute more and see what I can get out of it. And I think that's really important, is that, there's something that we can learn and benefit from. All of this is around us. No matter how bad it is, I find there's always something to be grateful for with everything that's going on. So being real mobile in the moment is a great way to do that. So let's see, now what? Sort of some takeaways as you go out into the real world. This is all about awareness when it comes down to it. You're aware of that this is how your thoughts generate feelings, and that you can let them go if you don't want to engage with them. So let that thought in, let that feeling in, see what it can do for you. And that keeps you in the moment and aware of what's happening. Spread the word as you have these sorts of experiences and realize this understanding, the shared language. This is something I do with companies, right? I'll come in and make sure the entire leadership has this understanding, and then they have that shared understanding, the shared language, and they become much more effective together. They don't get caught up in thoughts. They don't react to things that are happening outside of them. They're able to be in a place of contentment within themselves to respond effectively in the moment. And don't ever forget that you're human. It's this really interesting organism, you could say, that we're populating as we're walking around, experiencing life here on Earth. And we do really funny, silly things. We forget all the time. We fall down, we lose our balance, all that stuff. And it's fun and it's funny. And when you laugh at yourself, it makes it really hard to be hard on yourself. So I would encourage that. So I think we want to open up to questions now. This is really all about how people work. And, I like this idea about, ask me anything about how people work, because there's this kind of double entendre going where, there's a way that we work intrinsically within our heads, and then there's the way that we work together as people. And it's all interrelated. So I just wanted to open it up and see if anybody had any questions about anything that I've talked about. And I'll give it back to you, Jordan.
Great, thanks. So I've gone ahead and given everybody the ability to unmute yourselves. So if there are any folks with questions, please feel free to ask those. We've also got the chat box available. While you're thinking of those, Jeff, first I'd love to say, thank you for giving us the opportunity to do a bit of learning on a Friday morning. If I could ask a question, actually, around the concept of agility, I often find myself doing a lot of ruminating on stressful situations and interactions. And, I've often heard, slow down, try to get out of your head. Maybe if you could have some tangible tips, like what are some things that I can do to help myself kind of get out of that place?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question very much. And, it's so appropriate now. And I mean, it's like it has been, we've been talking about stress and de-stressing and avoiding stress. I mean, for 20, 30 years at least, right? And then now it's just come to this point where it's really hard to look out into the world and not find some place for stress. But what stress really is the result of an analysis that you've done in your head, right? You've looked out and you've seen what's out there, and you've thought about that a bit, and it's generated this feeling of stress, right? Some people, their chest tightens. Some people get a little nauseous. My head tends to it feels like a bolt that's just tightened and come to a stop. That's the result of the thinking and being paralyzed within your intellect by that thinking. So when the stress starts, we have a somatic experience of that. And, like the head twisting. And now, as soon as it starts, I know it, right? Now that I'm aware, and that's where the agility comes from, awareness, that when you're stressed out and you get caught up in thought, it's because you're not in the moment. And the awareness that that's why it's happening brings you into the moment. So when you start to feel that feeling around the stress that you can see it for what it is and be like, oh, there it is. that brings you into the moment and gives you a way to look at that, welcome it in, see what it's doing for you, see where it came from. What were you thinking that put you into that position? And realize that the feeling that you're having is just the way that you're making meaning out of the experience. The stress is only in your thinking. It's not actually outside. So when you realize that it's the way that you're making meaning of your experiences, then you can stop making that meaning of your experiences and you can let it go by, because the way you feel about the circumstances has nothing to do with the circumstances. So do you want to be stressed out about it, or do you want to be content about it? Because the circumstances haven't changed. It's just the way you think about them. Does that help?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And it looks like we've got a question from Carol Wolf in the chat box. What are your thoughts or tips regarding styles of communication for extroverts and introverts?
It's interesting. I appreciate the question, Carol, and I really am grateful that you're on the call. I was happy to see your name on the list. I think, the introvert extrovert thing is kind of funny to me. Sometimes I feel like an introvert, sometimes I feel like an extrovert. It just depends on the situation that I'm in, I think. And I think these kind of labels help, they create this kind of box for us to live within. And, if I've identified myself, defined myself as an extrovert, then that's the way I'm going to try and make myself act. But I think it misses the point of us being humans. And I think when we connect on a real human level, where we're listening to each other deeply and really interested and curious about what the other person is thinking, doing, why they're different than us, from this, place in the moment, we can become really curious about others. And that keeps us from getting caught up in our head. So a long way of answering the question is that if you're really connected with somebody, extrovert, introvert, it doesn't mean anything. You're in a place where you're feeding energy back and forth to each other, and you're doing it without labels. So, my communication with people of every different kind is pretty similar, because I show up in a place where I just want to learn about them and I want to understand that. I'm curious about how they think and how they tick and what have you. And all of that introvert extrovert stuff goes away. We're just, in a connection that's really a beautiful place. Does that help, Carol? I saw a little nod.
Yes, it does. The ambivert thing, yes. And I'm not one to be labeling, but just different styles of how people take in information or how people learn. Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you, Carol. Appreciate it.
Jeff, I have a question for you. First, thank you so much for just showing up the way that you did today and sharing more about your life and your journey as a human. I really appreciated that whole process. So how, using these principles, how can we, I think it kind of segues perfectly into what you were saying about like being present for others. So how can we do that in terms of business? How can we be radically collaborative with each other and utilize this opportunity to create a shared economy where all of us benefit?
I love that question, because that's what you and I do, right? We have this understanding between us that, we're going to show up as ourselves to work together for something greater than us. We're not, we're a lot of us in this radically collaborative mindset, understand that there are many places where we could compete against each other, and that maybe we should be cognizant of that competition. And, if you win something, then that means I lose something. I think when we take those sorts of concepts, constructs, and sort of let them go and just show up as ourselves with a true desire to help each other, to understand each other, to learn from each other, and to do something greater together, that's where that kind of beautiful thing comes in, where we're just people together trying to make great things happen. So, this idea of, in business, it's, we're just people in business, right? I mean, we want to have relationships with each other. And I think when we open that door, and Vicki, we've experienced this, right? When we open that door to work together, we realize that there's so much more that we can do than if we were competing against each other, And so I think and that expands out into how we're going to try and set up this, local supply chain, right? That we're just open to trying to help. And I think that's a contagious thing, right? It's why we have people that want to work with us, because they see this collaborative environment where it's just a bunch of people trying to, work together to make things better.
Thank you.
Does that help?
No, it was helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Yes.
I got a question for you about balance.
Sure thing, Mike.
So, as you and I talked, not to be specific about me, but I think a lot of people try to multitask, which is, humanly impossible. I personally am juggling really 3 or 4 completely separate careers. It's almost like skiing, mountain biking, and backpacking all at the same time. And they're really different. Maybe that's in the wrong parallel. Maybe the third one is like, being in a library. And some days I struggle with the balance. Some days it's great. Yesterday I had 3 Zoom calls in a row that had the most wildly different topics, because there are 3 different corners of my world. But how do you balance those things? And I guess in a more macro level, balancing a bunch of different stuff, since everybody's balancing being at home and trying to work and that kind of thing.
Right. It's like maybe not even, when I think about balance, it's like reverting back to this mean, this place of what do I call it here? Innate well-being that we have at our availability at all times. But when I look at that concept that you're talking about fitting it all in, and I think there's a couple things that come to mind for me. One is that a lot of time we feel out of balance because we're using so much mind space to think about what we need to do, should be doing, could have done better, what's next, how am I going to get all this stuff done? That thought process, just all those extra thoughts in there take up so much headspace that it's hard to look at things clearly. And if you realize that, and as soon as that thought process starts, just go, oh, there it is. There's that human thing going on, and let that go. Your headspace for that goes like that. And now you've got all this extra space to get stuff done. So that's one consideration, is that one of the reasons it feels so overwhelming is because you're thinking so hard about all of it, and you need to step back away from that. The other thing is being able to sort of recognize those cycles through your day where you're most effective at doing different kinds of things. And, and those vary for people to people too. I mean, after, in the afternoon, I might be excited about getting new things done. Early in the morning, I just want to do some reading. I don't want to think very hard. But then mid to late morning, I get real creative. And that's when I do my, my blogging and journaling and articles and things like that. So I think having an understanding about when you operate at, these different types of things most effectively, and waiting for the feeling to do something. I don't like to force myself to do something that I don't feel like doing. I think that's a real good indicator that you probably shouldn't be doing that at that moment. I think sometimes we don't realize that we have the ability to have this fluidity in our lives, that's the way life works. It's just always changing. And our moods and our feelings are always changing. And if I have 10 things to do and I feel like doing number 8, do number 8. There'll probably be a chance later to do number 2 and 3. And then so I would just, be real true to yourself about the type of tasks that you need to accomplish, and do those when they feel right to you, as opposed to forcing yourself to do them when they don't. Does that help at all, Mike?
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of what I was thinking, which was like schedule it out, like 9 to 11 do this, and 11 to 1 do that, and 1 to 3 do the other. And You know, I tend to use my calendar just for scheduled meetings and not for, okay, I'm going to blog during this time, or I'm going to make outreach calls. Like, you know, so I don't know, should I force myself into a calendar thing, or should I kind of, follow my instincts more like what you're saying? I'm personally, and not to make this whole conversation about me, but that's the kind of the split that I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I appreciate the question and talking about it a little bit more, because I would imagine everybody on this webinar has that same struggle, right, on a daily basis.
Yeah, it might be, you're home. Do I deal with the kids now, or do I take this call? So
right, and that's so a couple different things on that is when you're talking about scheduling everything, that to me is an intellectual endeavor, right? It's like you're really relying on your intellect in order to sort these things out, and it kind of leaves the human behind in a way, and it's forcing the human to do things that the intellect thinks are best, but it doesn't always resonate with you that way. So if there are certain sort of tasks, like you have to do calls on a regular basis, realize at what point in your day are you feeling most yourself to make calls. When do you enjoy making calls? Maybe schedule that in a little bit, and see how that goes. But really, I try and schedule as few things as possible, to leave as much open space as possible for me to do the things that feel right to do in the moment. And when I do that, I mean, it's amazing to me. Everything gets done. I mean, it just does. I don't have to stress about it. Because I'm moving through these phases throughout my day, I just do whatever kind of fits in at the time. And when I do that, I enjoy all of it. I mean, even the stuff that's really menial or whatever that I would normally not really enjoy, there's a part of my day when I like doing that. And then I feel good that I got it accomplished. And that gives me more energy going into whatever the next thing is that I need to do. So that's kind of how I look at it is, I try and be aware of when the intellect tries to run the show, because I know when that's happening, it's leaving me, the human behind, and I don't do things as well, as effectively, and as joyfully when I let the intellect figure out what's next.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Yes. Jeff, how do you recommend breaking a bad habit?
I mean, it's a great question, and my flippant reaction is stop. But it's habits are urges, right? A lot of times the habit itself, and I think about stuff like addiction, and as an extreme sense, and sometimes I like to use an extreme example as a way to just to give you something to look toward, as opposed to your specific experience that you're asking about, maybe. So when you think of something like an addiction, that's a habit at an extreme level, and it's an urge that that develops over time, and we get into this pattern to where that's just our go-to. The key to getting out of that and to not being an addict, and I work with some addicts as well, is to recognize when that urge starts, to feel what it's doing to you, and that gives you an awareness that brings you into the moment, and gives you some perspective to actually look at what that is. And if it's something like an addiction itself, it's a substance that you really don't want to use, you feel what's starting to get you into that, and you just let it go. And you might have to do that a lot, especially initially, before you realize that it's just your mind, if you will, messing with you and telling you that you need to do these kinds of things. So, I mean, I think for habits, I just, and I've had plenty of my own habits. Doing the other thing is, I really like that idea. Is if I don't know, I hesitate to give an example, but I would say, it all comes down to recognizing early on what's happening with your thoughts and how you're making meaning out of that, and letting it go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Hey, Jeff, maybe to kind of build on the last question, could you describe the difference between managing behavior, managing your thoughts, and what you're describing in terms of how thoughts created?
Sure. Manage behavior, managing thoughts, and how the thoughts are created. So one thing I like, this isn't about controlling, changing. You can't change your thoughts. Happens too fast. You got this great creative writing department between your ears. It's just generating, again, 30 to 70,000 thoughts every day. There's really not much you can do to get in the way of that. It's how you make meaning out of those thoughts that are coming out. So I think, just that understanding of being able to react in the moment based on how you're, experiencing the circumstances is the key to it. And I don't know that I answered it, Justin. What did I miss in there?
I think one of the things I run into is that there's a temptation to say, well, I should only think good thoughts or I should only think bad thoughts, and I need to manage my thoughts to feel good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Or,
I love that. It's
yeah.
So the good and the bad is interesting. Life is fluid, thought is fluid, your experience of life is fluid, and it can't always be good if it's fluid, right? It's moving through a spectrum. It's what you do with those experiences in the moment, right? If you're having a bad time, that's okay. I mean, we're human. It's fluid. We have good days and we have bad days. It's what you make of that experience. Do you beat yourself up about how this is a bad day, just another bad day, I just keep having these bad days? That, of course, if you let it, can lead to a whole week of bad days because you can't get that out of your head. So, I think it's important to understand that, life is happening. It's how you decide to experience it. And, I'm trying to think of how that reflects into behavior. And so I don't know if you give me a little bit more, Justin, on what you were thinking around behavior with that.
Yeah, I guess kind of related to the habits question, I found in my experience that when I try to force myself to change behavior, I end up focusing more on the behavior. And then that creates this feedback loop of like beating myself up. And it's a lot of work and rarely has have the attempts to change the behavior from the level of behavior actually worked sustainably. When I look back at my life, sometimes I'll look in the rearview mirror and be like, oh, I don't do that anymore. And it just doesn't make sense anymore. So I think that's kind of the difference I've experienced, is that when you try to force a behavior change, that's very different from all of a sudden having a different perspective that no longer leads to the behavior.
Right. And to me, what you just described is that difference between the intellectual pursuit and being in the moment, right? If as you force yourself, right? I mean, you're telling yourself this story that this has to happen, and if you don't do it, you're a failure. That's all happening within your intellect. If you let all that go and just be like, yeah, do I want to behave this way or not? In the moment, and be honest and true to yourself. Then then you avoid all that back talk. I know, when you were talking, I was thinking about how, sometimes still with my wife, she'll say something, of course, that triggers a reaction for me, and that I don't like, so that's a behavioral thing and a pattern and a habit, maybe even that I don't want to be part of. And I've gotten to the point where I now feel that coming before it even comes out of my mouth, that engagement or defense of myself, and I because I'm aware of it and recognize it for what it is, I just let it go by. I keep my mouth shut. I watch it go by, and if you will, the behavior has changed. And I didn't necessarily try to. I just put myself. I recognized that my thoughts were getting the best of me. I let that go by without acting on it, and I just sat back into the moment, and I was now present and aware. Thanks, man. I appreciate the exchange. Anybody else? Jordan, I see there's something in the chat. Is that a question?
Yeah, that was Carol's earlier question. Yeah, and we've got about 4 minutes left. So if there's any final questions or final thoughts from you, Jeff.
Final thoughts from me. Yeah, any other questions? I like that idea.
Jeff, just to,
I
go ahead, please.
I was just going to ask, Jeff, knowing what you know now, is there any specific tip you would give for applying your knowledge to being a parent of a young child?
I can't tell you how grateful I am that my baby's 22. I think to a certain extent, this approach might work best with children. Being able to be there in the moment, not, trying to drive their behavior. I remember one of my most difficult experiences through my childhood was my dad driving my behavior. I think when you show up with, there's this really cool thing about small children. They don't really have much intellectual development. They don't really get caught up in their thoughts. They don't beat themselves up. And they go through this very quick change in experience where they're crying their eyes out one second and the next second they're happy as pie. It's like, how does that happen? It's because they really only live in the moment. So if you can join them in that moment, I think, and connect with them there, I think it could be really helpful. As they start to develop and they start to deal with their intellect, you can share with them just this understanding that, their thoughts are fluid and that they're always changing, and that's okay. And to try and be in touch with the feelings that they're getting from those thoughts, and try and help them really appreciate, just the awareness that you get by being present. I don't know if that helps much, but thanks for the question, Gavin. It's funny. I haven't had much experience with little kids, knowing what I know now, and I know my kids wish I would have. So, I just want to, say thank you guys very much. Really apologize for the technical difficulties. I don't know, wireless internet at 8,500 feet is a hit or miss sometimes. But I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I hope it was helpful. And if if there's anything specific that this might have brought up for you that you wish that you could have asked or you'd like to talk about more, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can go through GBC to get a hold of me, or I imagine there's some other detail that'll come out. So I really appreciate you letting me work through this with you, and wish you all the best of luck. You really can go through this in a really nice place. I'm proof of that. Thank you.
Awesome. Jeff, thanks. We appreciate this so very much. And thanks everyone for joining us today and spending a bit of your Friday morning with us. As a reminder, please take a look at the post-event survey that we'll be sending out through email here just a few minutes after we wrap up. We'd love to have your feedback on this event and ideas for other type of programming that Good Business Colorado can put on. We have 3 other upcoming events that we'd love for you to check out. So on the 27th, next week, we've got Communications in Times of Uncertainty with our partners at the Alliance Center. June 4th, Good Business Colorado has partnered with Loco Think Tank up in Fort Collins to host a free Think event. And then finally, we're finalizing details on a town hall with Congressman Michael Bennett. So be on the lookout for more details there. And you can learn about any of these events on our website, goodbusinesscolorado.org/events. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate it and hope you have a great long holiday weekend.
Thanks, Jordan. Take care. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.